Hi, everybody. I'm Marina Yuryeva. I'm the Vice President of Out Film City, and today we're going to talk to the creators of Static Space, Kate Black-Spence and John Klein. John is the co-director, and Kate is director, writer, and the actor in this film. And Static Space is the film from our short um, lesbian program. So, hi, Kate and
Hi.
Hi. Hi
Hi.
there.
Nice to meet you.
You too.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for this film. It's wonderful.
Thank you so
I,
much.
yeah, I loved it, and it's so delicate. That's how it feels.
Oh, I
Delicate.
love that. I love that as an adjective for it. That's lovely. Thank you.
Yeah. So probably everybody asking you about this. How what was the idea? How did it come up? How
Well,
you wrote it, right? So
yes.
you were the one who came up with it.
Well, and I can only take some of the credit for coming up with it. It's there is a book called Can You Hear Me by John Cannon, um, which is the general premise of the film. His story really goes into a lot more detail, obviously, as a novel. Um, I read that book. He dedicated it to me because he had seen me act in a couple of web series, and he wrote Jamie to be someone that was modeled after me. So he sent me a copy of the book, wrote this lovely little thing, and I loved the book. I think a year or 2 years later, 2020 hits. It's
Mm.
February. It's a real bad time in the world, and we're in serious isolation. I had just written my first play, and I was sad to see, all this momentum have to halt because of COVID. And he reached out to me and was like, if you ever wanted to adapt one of my books to a play, you'd be welcome to, because he had read my play. And so I adapted his book into Static Space, the play, which was a 2-act, full, 90 some odd minute play. And I was really proud of what I came up with, given that it was COVID and there's isolation. And I wrote the play to be completely physical contact free, which I thought was really important to me, not knowing what the future of theater would look like at the time. And so John Klein, who I had worked with several times in small feature or small short films, I had reached out to him. He reached out to me. I can't remember how it worked. He asked to read the play, and he told me I'd be crazy not to make it into a short that we could shoot during COVID. Given the nature of the way the play was, it was really easy to adapt to be something that we could just have one actor primarily on camera, small skeleton crew, and it just sort of went from there.
Okay, great. And John, do you have anything to add to how did you get involved?
I mean, yeah. So Kate covered the whole genesis of it really well. I think we like, Kate and I had worked together for the first time, I think, on Night Lights back like 11 years ago at this point, which is, makes us feel old in and of itself. But we had done several things together. We'd always sort of felt like we wanted to really collaborate on something. And even like several years ago, we had like met up over lunch and just talked about, hey, like we should do something, but never materialized into anything. And when we finally, like when Kate sent me this play and I read it over like 4th of July weekend and was just like, just so struck by so many things in it that were so specific and yet so universal and relatable. Like I saw my relationship with my wife when it was just starting out, and it was a very long distance relationship, and this is like the ultimate long distance relationship.
Right.
And I saw these questions of identity and these things about just connection, and especially like we were in COVID for about 4 months at that point. We were really feeling that, just being stuck, right? Being stuck in our houses, being stuck in, talking to people on Zoom and things like that. I'm a teacher, so I was teaching online, and that's a whole other can of worms. This play spoke to all of those feelings without even mentioning COVID, really, right?
Mhm.
And I love so many of the details in that. And initially when we were talking about it, there was this sense of, oh, let's see, like could we write a feature out of this? And then we were like, money is a problem, so let's make a short out of it. And Kate started writing a short, and she got to this like point where she was sort of just like transcribing the dialogue into like, and she got like 45 pages into it. And it was like, I mean, this is great, but it's not a short. Like, we need to like condense this. And then I think we had a conversation about like, well, what's the point of view of this story? What's the entry point into this as a shorter project? And Kate, you know, Kate made the choice to focus specifically on Jamie in the barn. And that opened up a whole lot of visual potential, and also, you know, budgetarily, logistically was more feasible. Like, it's a barn, so it's much easier to sort of frame a story around that. And that enabled us to really think about, okay, wow, we can actually do this. And it being COVID, I think we were both just eager to do something. Yeah, just to make, to create, to feel that, and even to be around, even if it was a small crew, just to be around other like-minded collaborators was something that was really exciting for both of us.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So it was kind of coincidental that it turned out about, you know, in theme of isolation and
yes. I would definitely say, I mean, I don't think that I would have opted to adapt the book if I wasn't living through the isolating times of COVID as it was. The book itself deals with, you know, neither of that I think were quite as isolated in the book as I think I've chosen to make them. I think I enhanced that, I think, a bit, definitely because of the state of the world. And like, I brought a very different kind of understanding of what isolation can look like.
Yeah.
You know, I was in isolation here with my partner, and he the whole time was trying to like, you know, remind me, like, we're so lucky, so many people are completely by themselves. And I think that also sort of was in my head of like, what is it like to have someone that you're with, but also you're still so apart from everything else. And like, what does loneliness look like when it's still together with someone else?
Yeah,
it was, one fed the other, I think, definitely.
There's an element of that, I feel like, where those things that we're experiencing, just they come out in the art. Even if it's not a COVID movie, we were all experiencing those things. And so being on set, there was this sense of just the weight of it felt much more present and real. And that's true if you like in a lot of movies that, like, I remember we shot a film, it was like a zombie movie, you know, Chrysalis was one of the features that I directed, but it was shot in like the dead of winter in these abandoned buildings. And the misery comes out a little bit more. That feeling of like the slog of it really comes out a little bit more, just because you're experiencing that. You don't have to fake being cold. You don't have to fake being tired, because you're in the thick of that. And I feel like for this movie, I mean, it's as weird as that sounds, like, we didn't have to fake those feelings.
Yeah.
They were there. They were part of the fabric of who we were at the time we made that. And I think that's important to the art. Like, the reason I think there's a lot of reasons why I think it works, but I think one of the reasons that it is so emotionally resonant is because we were in the midst of those things, and that feeds into what's on screen.
That's very true. Thank you. And so the other thing is that I really liked about your film is we have most of our films are LGBT topic, and the issue of the film is usually LGBT. And what I really loved about yours, that the characters are queer, but the issue is not that. They're just, you know, the queerness here is they're just like regular people like anybody else.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I'm so glad that, yes, that was really important to me, I think, in terms of in writing the play. And I mean, just anything that I write with queer characters, I have just been so tired of seeing sort of trauma happening, or re-traumatizing, or explaining origins of queerness, of like, oh, well, why? Oh, I was abused as a child. Oh, okay, well then of course. Like, I have just been so frustrated, I think, with a lot of the queer stories that I had seen. And I'm seeing a big shift, I think, away from that lately, which I think is wonderful. I'm not saying that style isn't still important. I think there are still people that have a lot to say about that, and I think they should definitely tell their stories. But I know that like something I was really craving, and I think I noticed it most actually when I sat down and watched Schitt's Creek. But like what I've really just been craving is just to see myself and, you know, friends of mine and the queer community represented just living their lives. And it's not something you have to answer for every day of your life. It's not something you have to think about or put on every day. It's just who you are, in the same way that The Notebook isn't what we would call a straight romantic movie. It's just
Right.
it's just a romantic movie about a straight couple, and we don't even leave that last part attached to the description. Um, those are all the things that I think have been in my mind and things that I've really wanted to represent for a while now, and I've just been working on finding the best ways, I think, to do that.
There are
Yeah.
all these layers, I think, of representation, right, that are important. Like those stories that are about trauma and about what LGBT, you know, people have gone through. That is important. Those are important to tell those stories. But it's important to tell stories about just people.
Yeah.
And it would that, and to that end, I think it was very important to both of us, as it is in the play, to give Jamie and Noah a happy ending, to have something that felt like that rush of romance that, you know, you get at the end of a lot of romantic movies, is you
Yeah.
know, you get that feeling. And that even extended to, you know, we had conversations with Alexa and Connor, Alexa Borden and Connor Cook, who were our composers, and they gave us two different songs for the end credits. And one is the version that's in the film, and another one was it was in keeping with sort of the style of the rest of the music, which is very sort of peaceful and serene and introspective. And we heard both of those tracks, and there was a little bit of discussion, but it was really clear that no, this needs to be a release, right?
Yeah.
This needs to be this incredible, yes, we did this thing, like we made it through the worst of it, and now we get to be together. We get to see these two characters together, and I think that's, you know, the note that that music leaves the audience on at the end of the film. It's like we get to be swept up off our feet, just like they do. And that's important. It's important to have those kinds of movies too. And I've been really, I think, it's been gratifying to be at a bunch of other film festivals in blocks with other LGBT content and films that do share that sensibility. I feel like that's, to
Right.
Kate's point, there's been a movement towards a lot of that because of just the state of the world. Like it's nice to just feel happy sometimes in these
Yes.
movies, and that's important.
And oh, I'm sorry. When I took the play to Orlando, it was interesting. There were some people who were like in the audience afterwards in the feedback session. They were like, "Well, I just feel like the ending is too happy. Like I feel like it's too like it feels like maybe we should be left with more of a question." And I was like, I wrote this in 2020 when all we had were questions. Like I wanted to see a happy ending. I wanted to see a queer couple who I didn't have to wonder about, that I could just root for and know they're going to be okay. And I completely agree. It is the composers. I give them that full credit, that I think that last moment, there's not ambiguity. And I'm grateful for that.
Oh, no. Personally, I have to thank you for happy ending, because I'm one of the people at the festival who has that long-standing joke about dead lesbians in the movies.
Yes, yes.
And thank you for
Absolutely.
no dead lesbians. That's amazing.
Well, and I think we toy with, I think, a bit of that trope. We sort of toy with expectation, I think, a bit. I don't know who's watching this or whether they've seen the film or haven't, but we've thrown out all the spoilers at this point. But I think
No,
we
they've
did.
seen it. They've seen
That'd
it.
be great. Yeah, we
Mhm.
tiptoe to the edge, I think, a little bit of leaning into that expectation, because it is such a common story element. It's the dead lesbian. It's the joke at my old theater company was, it's the dead baby play. Like there's just, it's always an expectation of like this really terrible, tragic thing. And it was just important to me to acknowledge it, and then also not let that be the defining feature of this short.
And that's still there, right? Like you still in popular culture. I mean, we just saw Killing Eve, right? And that's still that we're dealing with that, right? In shows that are meant to be incredibly like forward thinking about LGBT tropes, and then nope, we're still in that. So, you know, I echo all of that. Absolutely.
Yeah. And the other thing that's also important, I think, for me, is that bisexual thing. You make one of the characters bisexual. So what did it mean to you?
Well, I mean, so there's so many things I think in that. First of all, I identify as bi. Writing the play and the film was really an opportunity for me to examine if I had stayed in Indiana, if I had continued to live, I was born there, grew up there, and if I had stayed there, would I have ever come into my own identity? It took me such a long time. In Indiana, nobody asked. Nobody asked me how I identified. Nobody asked if I was attracted to them. And so I just thought, no, there's a lot of women that I just want to model. Like I'm really, I look up to a lot of women. Really hard. I look up to these women. And then like over time, I started to realize it was an attraction. It took me 30 years to realize who I am and to realize all of these things about myself. And I genuinely, that includes having moved to Chicago and been around it and marched in the parades as an ally. And then over time being like, oh, I'm very bi. Like I get it now. And I feel like a lot of it is, we don't give people, it's a lot of like, who are you? And then you answer the question without any exploration, any opportunities. If it doesn't happen during these formative years and youth or college, it's sort of like, okay, well, your journey is done. You have identified yourself and it's over. I really think it's important to represent bi people on film and in theater and in every way possible, because I think it might be the only way many people ever stop to ask themselves who they might be. And I think it can't be overstated how much that could have changed my life at a much younger age if I had realized that I had the opportunity to answer that kind of question. So yeah, I think bisexuals are still massively erased in a lot of LGBTQ stories. There's not a lot of bisexuality. A lot of times there's an emphasis on, oh, you think you're bi, but you're going to end up with, this woman at the end. So everyone's going to call you, it's a lesbian film. It's a lesbian, this, that.
Right.
I'm married to a man. So therefore there's an understanding that like my bisexual journey is over. I've chosen, I must be straight now. So for all of these reasons, yes, it is important to me to have a bi character on film.
And again, that tropes. Oh, I'm sorry. No, the tropes that you were talking about, that we were talking about with dead lesbians, like the same sort of tropes for bisexuality are very much like present in films. Again, it's even in films that are meant to be forward thinking about lesbians or gay people. Like there is this sense of, oh, but bisexuals, like there's this idea of they're promiscuous because they can have it both ways, and there's so many things that look at bisexuality, it's still othering, right? And there's so much benefit in a movie, I think, that's again telling the story about just a person who's navigating those things and having honest conversations about those things. And I think again this goes back to the film being universal in its specificity. Is the script that Kate's written, is it's about somebody trying to figure out just who she is and what matters to her. And her bisexuality is part of that journey of like thinking about those things. But it really comes down to like what she wants and who she is as a person. And anyone who's ever had to make choices like that, whoever's had to gain that trust, that confidence, that search for those connections, I think that's what's, again, like what I loved about the script as I was reading it was I saw, even though I identify as straight, I'm a cis white male, but I still saw myself in that. And that mattered to me, like on an emotional level.
Yeah, you're right. And there is absolutely not enough bisexual films, and we struggle every year finding good, high quality bisexual films. So thank you for that. And so, but it was very hard to see that it was the bisexual theme. It was, I think, very, very short. So if you had you talked previously about making a feature, that was your first idea, right? So if you did make that feature, which themes would you empathize in?
Well, I think it's an excellent question. There's so many parts to it. I didn't want to tap again the explanation as to like what it means to be bisexual for her and all of these things and her struggles and her identity. I didn't want to put all of that into it because I feel like then again it turns into a story of origin and explanation in ways that I feel like might be
it makes it the issue.
Yeah, you might lose the love ultimately that's at the center of it. But in the play where we do have more time to explore it, which I do think I would model the feature a bit more after the play I think deals with that, I think, in a very different way, where it's really not Jamie who's struggling with coming to terms with her bisexuality. It actually comes to her quite naturally once she's actually asked the question and then goes, oh yeah, I guess, I mean, I think women are very attractive. I guess I would date one. I guess that means I'm bi. And oh no. It's sorry. So it's in that way, I think all of that in the play is dealt with differently. But also there's this really great opportunity in the play to say it's less an issue for Jamie and it's more of an issue for everyone who knows her from Indiana. And everyone who's like, no, wait, what does this mean? Like, you're dating a woman, what does that mean? And I would like to touch a bit more on that, I think, if we did the feature. I'd like to also, I think, focus a bit more on what Jamie's background is in terms of her the marriage that has sort of failed and what baggage that might have left her with. I'd also like to definitely focus on Noah, which our short film does not have time and, as John spoke to, budget to explore at this point. But Noah, her isolation in space, the only people that she talks to are people that are affiliated with the mission back on Earth. And so also to that degree, she talks to people all the time, but she doesn't talk as a human. She talks as an employee, as a machine. And that's also a very different kind of isolation. So I'd also want to talk a bit about, when work is all consuming, the mental toll that takes. So, and I think mental wellness in general is something that I'd want to focus on. That's definitely a theme more of the play.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that, because I feel like what struck me about the play, and really like the climactic moment of the play, like at the end of the first act. I'm not going to ruin it, but it's about that. It's about that, like the dynamic that emerges from her ex-husband, right, and how that has affected her self-confidence and the way she perceives the world, and how that's impacted the way she's been unable in many ways to explore her sexuality. And that goes for both of them. Like, Noah up in space has been rendered almost part of the machine. She's an automaton. She's being forced to like monitor all of her different levels and make sure that she's not having any emotional spikes that are going to cause her to do something that's not in keeping with the mission. The isolation is part of the point. It's being imposed on her. So to be able to explore those things in a longer format, like, that's, I think, part of the joy of this is a short film can isolate like a very specific point of view, and a feature can sprawl a little bit.
Yes.
That's great. And so there are two important moments in the movie.
Yes.
That I noticed. One was when Noah gets to the hospital, and Jamie, that moment when Jamie calls, and she ends up saying that, no, I'm nobody.
Yeah.
So for you, was it more about that connection that is kind of weird, that was made weird, that how they met and what they mean to each other, and that they mean a lot, but officially they are not anything? Or does it have any LGBT connotation to that?
I think it's definitely, again, part of the joy of a short is letting it be sort of a Rorschach test for whatever the audience wants to put on top of that moment. My intention was to sort of let people go to either place that feels fitting for them. I think that Jamie has not had the opportunity to identify for herself all of the implications of queerness and the fact that would mean that she has no bearing in this situation, no rights to hospital private information, but also knowing that she befriended an astronaut of international importance, knowing that she, in the grand scheme of things, is basically nothing, and maybe Noah and that relationship meant much more to her than she ever would have meant to Noah. She can't explain to these people that, run this space station. She can't explain to them who she is because everything sounds meaningless. Saying I'm just someone in Indiana with a ham radio who also maybe has fallen in love with this astronaut. So I think that moment is such an explosion of reasons why she needs to hang up the phone, that it sort of just renders her paralyzed.
Right.
And yeah, I guess, I think that's the best way to, answer that, is sort of a little bit of both is the answer, I think.
Yeah. And the other moment was when she's talking to Noah, and she wants to be an astronaut, and she says, I don't remember, I hate Indiana, or
I think I hate Indiana. Yeah, I wish I was an astronaut. I wish this wasn't my life.
Yeah, I wish it wasn't my life, that one.
Yeah, that was, I think, it's definitely a moment that changes Jamie in really dramatic ways, where I think I describe her as living her own life on autopilot a bit, and never again having asked herself, is she happy? Is she happy with what she's doing? Is she happy with where she's living and the way she's living her life? And that came about from knowing so many people in Indiana who I watched choose not to ask themselves those questions for fear of the answer. It was really important to me to include a bit of that. I joke that this film and the play is sort of my Stockholm love letter to Indiana. It's complicated. My feelings towards Indiana. I give it a lot of credit for parts of my life, and one of my proudest moments was being able to get out, because not everyone who wanted to leave could. It's a bit of a vacuum. So I wanted that to be addressed, especially on behalf of any queer people in Indiana who feel like they can't leave and they also can't fully be themselves. When we took this to the Indiana LGBTQ Fest, Indiana Queer Fest? Oh gosh, I forgot the name.
It was the Indianapolis LGBT Film Festival.
Thank you. Okay, great. And they were amazing, and they were a really wonderful festival. It was really neat watching this there, because that moment when she says, I wish this wasn't my life, I think I hate Indiana, there was an audible reaction in the crowd that felt very much to me like I was like, these are my people and they understand. And I just think, again, if I had seen that in high school, maybe that could have changed a lot of what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go. So, and I'm very happy with where I am now and the life that I have here. It took me a little longer to get here, I think, than I would have hoped.
Great, thank you. So, and for the future, what do you do? Can you still do that feature film, maybe, or what are your plans?
I will throw it to John in that, but I will say, if anyone wants to help us make it a reality, I'm very open to anyone who knows where we can get, I don't know, a spaceship or a set piece that might be very expensive. But John, I'll leave that to you.
We've had conversations about a lot of the ways, like, okay, so Static Space was this budget of a movie, right? And it's a 30-minute movie roughly. So like, times that by 3, it's a 90-minute movie. We could figure out how to execute that in some way. Obviously, like building, the Odie, which is Noah's sort of capsule that she lives in. What would that take? I've seen several movies that were micro budget films where they literally built a capsule in a garage and figured out how to do these lighting effects and the green screen. Like it's so much, everything is so much more feasible on a budget nowadays, to make these sorts of things a reality. So there's been lots of talks we've had about how could we do these things, but then also it's not wanting to betray the story of it. Like, what other things can we show, you know, with the larger expanse of a feature, you know, the other characters, you know, Enver on the Noah side and her, you know, Lewis on the other, on Jamie's side, you know, how do we expand that world? So there's a lot of conversation about that just from the creative standpoint. Like, you don't just want to make the feature to make the feature. You want to find new things to say about it, new places to explore, while still figuring out what made the short tick, like what made that work and what made that so emotionally resonant. So yeah, so I think it's a mixture of both of those things. It's the creative side of, you know, what does Kate want to say with this script, and what do we want to say if we're directing it that way? And then on the logistical and producing and distribution side, you make a feature and there's a lot more expectations about it going somewhere, and, you know, did larger distribution deals and things like that. So I think there would be a hope of trying to orchestrate those sorts of things a little bit more in advance. I think Kate and I we made this to make it. Like, we made this just like, hey, we just want to do something because it's COVID and we're tired and frustrated and sad and confused about all these things. And this is important to us to just be artists and remind ourselves that we're artists.
Yes.
And then we made this thing and it didn't suck. Like, it actually wound up being pretty good. And we were really proud of it. And then we've sent it up to festivals, and a fair number of people seem to agree with us that it does not suck. And that's been really, really heartwarming and gratifying. And to see those reactions at the LGBT and all these things, like that's like validates, I think, for us, our feelings as we were making the film. So we want the feature to have that same kind of, you know, same kind of growth and reaction.
Right.
So
thank you so much. It was great. And yeah, good luck with the future. And yeah, hopefully everything works out.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.